Lee Zapis, how are you doing?
Well, how are you doing, Shawn? Nice
Um,
to see
um,
you.
it's good to see you too. I am jealous of your guitar collection.
Oh,
Why
thanks.
don't you why don't you pan
I'll
it around a little bit? So
pan it around.
yeah.
Those are my acoustics. These are my electrics.
Oh man.
Then I have a couple nice arch tops that you can't see. That so I'm an aficionado of the guitar. I wish I played better, but unfortunately, I never had the. I always wanted to be a rock star. I didn't want to really be a musician. There's a difference.
Right.
Yeah,
There is somewhat of a difference there.
yeah,
Um, I think rock stars make a lot more money.
yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
so I want my audience to know how we met, to provide a little bit of context. So, and it might have been 2005, 2006, sometime in that time frame, that I did a podcast. I was on an episode of a podcast on OCN, and you
Hmm.
were listening. And after the podcast was over, I think I had said something about a black gospel setting of an Orthodox liturgy or something, and I think that you had a similar thought, similar
Yeah.
idea,
Hmm.
and so you were like, "Hey, let me get in touch with this guy and see if we can work something out." So you got in touch with me. We started talking, and then we kind of intermittently were talking.
Right.
We talk for a while, and then a couple years would go by, and then we kind of refresh the communication and start talking about it again, until fairly recently when the stars aligned and Metropolitan Savas essentially blessed and signed off on this project,
Yeah.
the How Sweet the Sound project,
Hmm.
and then the rest. I guess the rest is history.
Yeah. Very recent history.
Yeah, very recently. It's interesting because so much has changed over the last couple months that
Yeah.
it makes February 1st to be exact,
Yeah.
seem like it was forever ago.
Oh yeah.
You know?
It's very strange because it's I remember going back to when we first came into contact. I think social media back then was kind of a new thing, and there was a lot of kind of optimism and hope about it. Connecting people. In my opinion, it's turned into this uh, terrible place where people yell at each other and
Yeah.
insult each other and spread, hate and misinformation. And so I got off it a number of years ago. And because for me, it was a net negative. I still like looking at funny dog videos and cat videos, and those are kind of fun, or, great, sporting plays. But for the most part, I think it's a net negative for society. But there is some positives that come out of it, like any new technology. There's people can use it for, good things and bad things. And one of the good things, obviously, was how we met. And
Yeah.
if without it, I don't think we would have ever crossed paths. Um, and so, going back a little bit about how I got to this point, I've had a lot of blessings in my life, and one of the greatest blessings was working in the black community for 20 years when my family owned a very prominent and successful black radio station, or urban contemporary, whatever you want to call it, station that targeted the African American community. So for 20 years, I worked in that community and was exposed to, the culture, the music especially, and just the, feeling of love that most people have. And I grew up as an Orthodox. I'm kind of a, uh, born Orthodox, and what I've always found is that it's funny. A lot of the converts are way more knowledgeable about our religion than the ones that sort of grew up in it and have taken it for granted. and we sort of maybe practice certain things that we jokingly called yayology, which is like, yaya means grandmother in Greek, and it's like, those were, they're kind of her traditions or what she grew up with are not exactly maybe, based on, church doctrine. But and one of the things that always has frustrated me about our church, the Greek Orthodox Church in America specifically, is the lack of participation among our congregation during a service. Some people sing along, but very few people know the hymns. We have less and less, native Greek speakers in our church. And so, English is the main language for most of the people in our community. And so they can't really sing along to the Greek Orthodox hymns. And you're becoming more of an observer than a participant. And so I've always had this idea, having attended a number of programs where I've heard gospel choirs. In fact, our radio station sponsored a youth choir for many years, which was very successful. And, there's a feeling about it that when you get in and you're praising the Lord and in an environment where everyone is participating, as opposed to, watching like a performance, like I feel a lot of times I'm watching a performance when I go to our liturgy. I thought, what can we do to sort of meld these two traditions into one and make our liturgy more accessible? And that's, how we started talking about.
Yeah, and thank you so much for reaching out, because none of this would have been possible. If folks want to know what it is that we're talking about in particular, you can go to howsweetthesound.net, and there are clips from the concert that we did, and there's more information there. But without your financial support, without your vision, and without your persistence, none of this would have been possible.
Well, thanks.
One thing that you did also, and I was noticing in some words about you describing who you are and stuff on one of your websites, I noticed that you have this phrase, "Good people make great partners." People make great partners, and it seems as though that you have a knack for connecting the right people to do the right kinds of projects. For instance, part of our team is Dr. Marissa Moore, and her particular skill set was a wonderful balance for my skill set as far as how this project went. And I think going forward, all of us together make a really strong team. Can you talk a little bit about maybe just that idea of good people making great partners?
Yeah, I think I picked that up from my father, that kind of ability. I'm going to lower this blind because it's a little bright on the light here, so give me 1 second here.
Yeah.
That's better. So I think, I think of it as one of my strengths, that kind of I know what I don't know, and I think I have a very strong vision a lot of times, and it takes sometimes a while for it to come into focus. I mean, I'll have an idea pop in my head, and I'll mull it over, think about it when I'm driving by myself or if I'm walking. A lot of times it's as I'm listening to music. My musical taste is really all over the place. I like opera, bluegrass, jazz, gospel. I mean, if I were to share with you my Spotify playlist, it would be an interesting psychological experiment to go, what's wrong with this person? And so, to me, if I think about an idea, if I have an idea and it kind of stays with me, then I think it's something I'm thinking about pursuing. And needless to say, I'm somebody with, I have limited skills. To me, everyone has limited skills, but I think a lot of it is a key to success is knowing those limitations. And so I've always had a kind of it wasn't a conscious thing. I've always had like a wide social network. And I had great parents. They exposed me to a lot of different things early on. Where my mom was an immigrant, my dad was parents of immigrants. We had that kind of immigrant. We grew up with that immigrant mentality, and we're just had respect and for other people of all different kind of nationalities and races. And so I think the ability to sort of see talent in other people and their skill set, and how you could take different skills from different people, combine them to work towards a common goal. I enjoy doing that and trying to find people. I think I'm a good judge of character. When I not to being a good judge of character, my wife tells me, she gives me her opinion, which usually is helpful. And but for the most part, I've been very fortunate in being able to find people that are have talent and passion for other things. And so going back to that network, so I have I like music makers like yourself, people that can make music. Like I love that old Chuck Berry, Johnny Be Good. He could play the guitar like ringing a bell. I see people who have like this crazy ability to, it's like, I don't know what's going on in their brain, but whatever they're thinking, it's coming out through their fingers or their mouth or whatever. And it's like, to me, it just blows me away. And whether it's a full, orchestral, Cleveland orchestra, or an amazing bluegrass band, or a jazz ensemble that is just, cooking on all cylinders. I mean, that just blows me away. And I think appreciating those music makers and artists, people in business sort of have that skill. We've had a lot of people, approach us about investing in their entities, and it's always a team. There's obviously a lead singer, if you want to call it that has a vision, has brought a team. The ones that can bring a team together are much more interesting to invest in, and a safer investment than one individual. And so I remember talking to a guy one time. He was starting a business and he wanted to raise some money. And I said, well, what are you going to do with the money? Well, I'm going to bring on my, my partners, full time, because they're working, working full time and working part time on this project. I like to bring them on full time. And I said, okay, well, what do they do? Well, it turns out they were all engineers. It's like, and I said to him, like, it's like starting a band with 4 bass players. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. You need a rhythm section, you need a lead singer, you need whatever strings, horns, or at least they need a duo. It's like, or like they talk about in the restaurant business, front of house and back of house. You have that complementary thing. My dad used to call it, you need a Mr. Inside and a Mr. Outside. And so I've always tried to, look for people with talent and skill sets that, excite me, and then try to find projects, or projects find me, that I think I can maybe, help in putting together those teams.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and so where you're from? I mean, you said a little bit about your about your parents, but where you're from, where you grew up, and what your childhood was like. And in particular, if you can maybe talk a little bit more about how music was impactful, and maybe some early experiences with music, and maybe some early influences as far as people that were inspirational and that kind of thing.
Sure. I mean, he was born and raised in Cleveland. Like I said earlier, my parents were immigrant stock. My mom was born in Greece, came here after World War II. My dad was born here in Cleveland, but his parents were born in Greece. And so I grew up in the Greek community, very tight-knit community, and very active. And what was interesting from my musical kind of education, if you want to call it that, my parents did a Greek radio program for many, many years in Cleveland. My dad started one in 1949. My mom joined him when they got married in 52. They did it at various radio stations in town until the early 60s when they were able to start a brand new FM station with 3 other partners. And from 1962 to 81, it was what we called a brokered radio station. So every hour, every half hour, a different ethnic group or other people could come in and buy a block of time and then program it themselves. They'd go out and sell their own sponsors. They'd produce it, they'd host it. And so I grew up in that environment. And when I was a teenager, I was always fascinated by the radio business. And I went and got my FCC license. And back in those days, you actually had to take a test and know the difference between an amp and an ohm, and which I couldn't tell you today. But my dad drove me to Detroit to the FCC field office to take the exam. And I got my 3rd class license, which meant you can operate a transmitter. And so I did that, and then I got summer jobs where I'd work at the radio station running recorded programs, and it started at the worst job ever. My first on-air job, if you want to call it that, was one summer. It was Saturday night from 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. to like 8 in the morning on Sunday, and by myself in this old building in a kind of a rough part of town back then, and playing one tape after the other and trying to stay awake. And it was very interesting, and I think back of it now, there's a lot of great memories. But then I progressed to now being engineering, if you want to call it that, being a board op for all the other ethnic programs. Italian, I mean, it's amazing what we had. We had Italian, Slovenian, German, Polish, Indian, Hebrew, Irish. I mean, it was like, I used to joke that any ethnic group in Cleveland that could get $100 together, they had their own show. And there were some guys that did a nighttime jazz show. Some guys did I think our station had the first progressive rock station. When I say station, program on commercial FM before FM stations converted to full-time format. And so I was exposed to so many different forms of music. Salsa was a big programming block. Indian, like I said, Indian was a small programming block, but something about Indian music really kind of, it just connected with me. And Arabic music, I think it's the whole kind of minor key kind of stuff that, is similar to Greek music. The bouzouki is very influential. In fact, I see one hanging over my shoulder. So, I had this, this exposure to a lot of interesting music. And then I got to college and then worked at the college radio station, hearing different people. And I've always been, I've taken music lessons all my life. And in fact, a few years ago, I took up the violin as if, I should have just, it's like, hey, sure, why not? The violin is 60. That makes a lot of sense, But I enjoy it, and it's, challenging. And so, but I've never been a great music maker. It's always been hard for me. I shouldn't say hard. It's never come easy to me. Like I know some people. Like you talked earlier about Dr. Marissa Moore. When she was a child, she was like, an unbelievable musician. The youngest member of the Cleveland Youth Orchestra. She was a flute player, and she's got a beautiful voice and plays piano. And I remember talking to her when she was a kid, and she basically said it just clicked for her. I don't even know how to explain it, but that never happened for me. But it never diminished my love for music. And so, I listened to a lot of music, listened to a lot of live music. And so when we connected, I started thinking to myself, maybe this is the one thing I can do for the benefit of orthodoxy. I can't sing, I can't write music, I can't do Byzantine chanting, but what I can do with the gifts I've been given, both, I guess, the gifts I've been given through the success I've been able to have in my life, I can find people to work with that have the same vision, and I can support them and be kind of a patron to this effort.
Yeah. Well, as I've said this before, without that skill set, without the support, we wouldn't be talking right now. Yeah. With the production that we did, would not have occurred. And let's talk a little bit about that because
Mm-hmm.
so okay, we're going to do this program. We're going to tell people about it. I mean, we did the things that we're supposed to do. You know, we have a
Yeah.
website and we had like a promo video and and I put some stuff out on social media and yeah, I mean, we did the things that we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
But you and I both know that typically, and it's unfortunate that it's this way, but the rule tends to be that you you know you write great music, you have great musicians and great people associated with the project, you promote it like crazy, and nobody shows up.
Yeah.
Because it's not pop music. It's not.
Right. Right.
It's not a mainstream thing. And the
Mm-hmm.
program that we did was a very niche. There's only a few people. It seems like that would
Yeah.
actually really be into that, and
Mm-hmm.
yet we had more than 300 people there. I mean, it kept selling out. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a free program, but we had free ticket sales so we could keep track of folks. And it kept selling out. I mean, I think we thought that if we could get 100 people there,
Oh yeah.
that would be a total slam dunk and a total success. We
Yeah.
had more than 300 people there, and during the program, it was live streamed. 500 people were watching live, and then
Yeah.
now thousands of people have watched it worldwide,
Yeah. All over the
the
world.
on the
Yeah.
replays.
I think what was the last thing? I think it was like 23 countries. Last rec numbers I saw in 46 states.
Yeah,
I think you're right. It's like it's so nichey, but I think that's what works today in the world. But it's what I hope what we've done is kind of have lit a spark, and will encourage other people to pursue their ideas. Somebody told me that there was a gentleman, and I have to reach out to him. I think he's up in Minnesota, that was interested in doing like a bluegrass Orthodox liturgical music. And I'm like, that's kind of cool, and again, I think we've talked before about how Orthodoxy has been taken all over the world, and when you go to Africa, they are not singing Greek hymns; they're singing in their native language, Swahili.
right.
I've seen it in Kenya, and it's like it connects to it connects on a much more emotional level, when it's sung in their own language.
Yeah, and part of the language of the people, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure.
And I talked about this on Orthodoxy. What's the name of the program? Ancient Faith
Oh yeah, yeah.
Today Live.
Hmm.
When was that? Maybe it was a couple days ago. I
Yeah,
talked about this this idea of the language, the sort of cultural language, and how music is so critical to that communication.
hmm,
And for, I think, Orthodoxy maybe to connect in the way that it's capable of really connecting, and the way historically it has connected, it's because the church has been wise enough to incorporate not just the spoken language, but sort of local traditions
hmm,
as far as music. And that's why
yeah,
when you go to an Orthodox service in different parts of the world, that's why the music sounds different,
right.
and obviously the spoken language is different. So one thing in you were talking about, you know, like African Orthodoxy. One of the things is you would see like hand drums,
Hmm.
the service,
Yeah,
or other percussion instruments, and then also dance is like part of the service.
yeah,
And that's because that's sort of the there's like a cultural cachet. There's a an importance of in a significance of those components, those aspects, you know.
Hmm.
And then in the Greek church, what has become commonplace, very normal, is to have an organ.
Right.
And now, of course, the organ is not necessarily functioning like we might see an organ function like in a black church or something,
Right. Right.
but the organ is there.
Yeah.
And one thing I thought was interesting about our program was we incorporated percussion, and we incorporated the B3 organ because of
Yeah.
their critical in a black church setting, because of their
Yeah.
critical importance there, but then also because those things are also integral parts of other Orthodox sort of communities.
Hmm.
So it was an opportunity to bring a lot of different things,
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. I don't really know the history of how the organ got introduced into the Greek Orthodox Church. I mean, it's a Western American, whatever you want to call it, you know, origins. And so when I talked about this project with some people, they're like, well, that, we can't, that's, we can't, go against our traditions. And I'm like, excuse me, but the organ is not part of our tradition. I mean, that wasn't, you're not going to go back to Greece and hear an organ play. I think of the organ in our church, it's kind of like a giant pitch pipe, It's not really playing, kind of like you would hear a B3 in a, African American gospel church.
Right.
So I know it was funny when we were talking about this project. I was approaching, Metropolitan Savas about his, blessings, and we were kind of pushing him, like, he was like, okay, the B3, and then we got to the hand drums. He's like, well, I don't know about that, And I said, well, how about a funky bass? It's like, well, let's not go that far, So baby steps. I can see though, one of these days though, it's going to be. I want to see the day where we can do an entire liturgy in this gospel tradition with congregation participating, blacks and whites together. That would be the ultimate.
When we were at the event, the participants, the folks that showed up to
Yeah.
witness, it was really diverse group of people.
Oh yeah.
And I think easily it could have been sort of a monolithic kind of audience,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But it was pan-Orthodox, so there were a
Yeah.
lot of folks from different Orthodox communities.
Yeah.
But then there's also a lot of folks from some of the black churches
Yeah.
in Columbus, in particular. A lot of folks came from the church that I'm the minister of music at, Second Baptist
Yeah.
Church, and so I think that made it really feel like. And then, of course, the speakers that we had were a nice
Oh yeah.
match for what it was that we were doing. Father Moses
Mhm.
Berry and Dr. Peter Butenev, and then, of course, Metropolitan Savas spoke.
Yeah.
And one thing that struck me about Father Savas, as he wants us to call him,
Yeah.
is when, like, after the program. No, of course I met him before,
Yeah.
but after the program, he comes up to me and he's he's trying to dap me up and stuff, which was which I don't know if I expected that,
Yeah.
and then he sort of talked to me a little bit about why. Why that approach to it, because of
Yeah.
where he's from, how he grew up,
Yeah.
and then we talked a little bit about the impact of music on his life and everything, and
Yeah, he's a
so
big music lover. Yeah. He sang in a
yeah,
band. He still sings in a duo with his brother.
yeah,
You could
yeah,
he call himself Dmitri. His brother's name is Dimitri, They call themselves Mitri and the Metro.
Yeah.
I'll ask them to share some of those videos. Yeah.
Well, again, this speaks to the power of music.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It speaks to the power of music that this entire project, our relationship, the fact that Metropolitan Savas wanted to bless this event, encourage this event, support this event, come to the event,
Yeah.
preside over the event, all of the ways that he was involved in the event. It just speaks to the power of music and how powerful that force is, in how it sort of gets in you. And
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Was you're talking about the power of music, and you see it all the time. And so when my father was in the last years of his life, he started developing dementia, and his memory was fading. And it was interesting. His short-term memory was not very it's not working very well, but his long-term memory was interesting. And so he was living in a retirement community after my mom had passed away, and they would it was funny. He couldn't remember a lot of things that happened just earlier that day or the day before, but they would have these sing-alongs with all these people that were in their 80s and 90s, and yet they could remember all the lyrics, all the to all these songs that they heard as 70, 80 years ago. And so
Right.
I don't know what it is about music that sort of wires the brain that people can think of that. And there's all kinds of studies that talk about being exposed to that whole baby Mozart kind of stuff. But there's something. I'm always suspicious of anyone who says they don't like music, or dogs. I'm like, what the hell's wrong with these people? Yeah.
Thank you for saying that, and
Yeah.
especially the dogs part.
Yeah.
But what was I going to say? So the music thing, I'm stuck with music. But I mean that in the
Good
most
way.
positive way.
Sure.
I would be miserable without it. I don't know what my life would be without music. Matter of fact, it is music that has created the kind of living that I have, that
Yeah.
has purchased all the stuff that I have, that has
Hmm.
facilitated every meaningful relationship that I have,
Yeah.
and it's been a powerful. It's been a powerful force in my life.
Yeah.
And I've said this a couple times in these interviews, but I can't think of any other discipline that so easily creates instant friendships.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I think what you've hit upon, and you are, because you are a thoughtful person and you kind of think about your place in the world. I have found, to me, being a music maker is like such an amazing gift. And some of the people I've run into who have that gift, they don't really appreciate it for the power that it has. And like you said, you sit down and play something for someone, and there's a connection there. I've never seen somebody sit down at a piano or pick up a guitar or violin and start playing, and people walk away. It's like they're drawn to it. It's weird. And so those people that have that gift like you do, it's I don't know if you want to get obviously we're both have faith that is a gift from God, and if it is, then it shouldn't be squandered or wasted. It should be shared.
Yes. So I heard you say that, we met before the program, we met in person for the first time.
Yeah.
You brought your wife to Columbus, and we had a nice meal together.
Isn't that crazy? In 15, from the time we met, almost 15 years, and we never met in person, even though we're only 2 hours apart. It's,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Which was really cool. One thing that I learned about you when we met in person was that you had started, and you mentioned it in this interview, that you had started playing violin.
Yeah.
So, oh, okay,
There it
okay,
is.
yeah.
Right next to
So,
my little music room. I got my sheet music out here.
so let me ask
Don't
you.
ask me to play. Don't ask me to play anything.
I'm not going to ask you to play, but I am going to ask you, what does a practice session look like for you? Like, what kind of stuff are you practicing? What are you still trying to grapple with as far as just dealing with the instrument?
Yeah. I mean, my biggest problem with the violin is actually there was the first instrument I ever played as a kid. I went to, band tryout in I think elementary school, and I wanted to play the clarinet, but I couldn't get a sound out of the clarinet for whatever reason. I don't know whether somebody wasn't teaching me right or I wasn't, doing whatever. So I love the clarinet too. I love every instrument basically. And they're like, oh, how about the violin? Okay, so I took the violin and played around. Then over the years, I gravitate towards the guitar because, of course, the Beatles and all that kind of influenced. And I took piano. I took piano for 3 years in college, and as an elective, and so I enjoyed that. But my problem is I never had a lot of discipline, and so today, I'm more patient, and I'll know I'll never be a virtuoso, but I'm doing it because I enjoy it and it's interesting to me, and I've always loved the sound of the violin. So my basic session is, I had a teacher for a number of years when I started. I've recently stopped working with her and looking for somebody else to sort of kind of get re-inspired. But I'm doing a lot of online learning, and which is an amazing tool. I mean, I think to myself, gosh, I wish I would have had that when I was a kid. YouTube videos and people teaching, there's tons of resources for learning, an instrument or songs. And so there's a woman named Mari Black she's up in New England, and she's a great fiddle player. She plays primarily Scottish and Irish fiddle tunes, and she's really terrific. But she's also a really great teacher. So she posts a new song every month, and I, try to work through those things. And so, I try to practice at least an hour a day, and here in this room, and with my computer next to me, and going back and forth. So it's helps to keep me sane.
You mentioned this thing about the access that we have now to, all of this information.
Oh my God!
And like it's all free. I mean, so much stuff is free.
Yeah.
And yesterday I interviewed the great bass player, online content creator, and music producer Yannick Guezdala. And one thing that we were talking about was that I think people below a certain age group, I think necessarily don't or are not in a headspace to be able to really value all of this access to all of this
Yeah.
information in a way that older people are.
Right.
I'm 45, and it seems like, I don't know, late 30s, mid to late 30s, and older, I think, are still in a position where they can sort of still really value the fact that they're able to access all this information and
Right.
not sort of take it for granted.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because, when I was coming up, you had to pay for everything. I mean, you had to actually save money to buy a record. You had to, and then there was a lot of sort of social activities surrounding listening to music. So, for instance, like when I was in music school, a regular thing that we would do is grab a pizza and listen to a John Coltrane record that we hadn't heard collectively yet. And then all the conversations that came out of that. Unfortunately, we're in a situation now where there's so much YouTube footage where I think people feel like they don't have to have the sort of social interaction, the actual social interaction, not the
Right.
social media interaction.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And so I think, and then again, social media, I think, for all of the positive things that I think it can offer, I think creates an illusion that we are more connected than we actually are.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Yeah, there's they're kind of like, oh, I have all these friends, and it's like, one of my light bulb moments of Facebook when I was on it was I was at a restaurant, and there was one of my Facebook friends at the restaurant, and I'm like, God, I don't want to talk to him. And then I thought to myself, well, why am I friends with him on Facebook if I don't want to talk to him in person? It's like, so I'm like, there was a light bulb moment, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be on Facebook.
Ah, that's great.
Yeah, and it was like, oh my gosh, it's like, what am I doing? Why do I have all these people that as if they care what I'm doing, and the reality is I don't care that they care what I'm doing. But you're right. I mean, I think younger people sort of take this technology for granted. I'm 63. Closing in on 64, and when I think to myself growing up like I did, around the radio business, and you had big vinyl records, LPs, and your library was this huge physical space to house 1,000 albums, and then you realize in a size of when the iPod first came out, you go, oh my gosh, I can have an entire music library in a device that's the size of a pack of cigarettes. I mean, and then of course with streaming, with Spotify, to me it's a miracle. It's like they have virtually every song that's ever been recorded, accessible at the press of a button. I mean, that's just insane to me. And I'm glad I'm like the age I am, so I can appreciate it, but not, if I was a little older, I wouldn't even be, I know some guys that are actually, around my age and, who are not into, they're just not the technological savvy as they could be. But I think you're right about the people mistake having followers and friends on these different social media platforms as being socially connected. And to me, when I like doing going to a lot of live music shows in small venues. I'm not really big on the arena shows anymore. But when you get into a small venue and you see a great band who are kind of in sync and playing with fervor and passion. Last year I got to see Del McCurry and his band, his two sons, and the bluegrass band, and the crowd was really into it, and their musicianship was so impeccable. And when they would kick it into high gear, it's like it's like magic. It's like they're just you've seen it, you've experienced it, you've experienced it as a musician. I've never experienced from that point of view, but it connects people on a gut level. The musicians with the audience. And you're right, music is a social thing. The whole idea of, I can listen, everyone's got their own Spotify playlist, everyone's, there's no that connection that used to be so readily apparent with music. Is you have to work at it today. Before, remember, you'd be driving down the street and the radio's playing in the car, and the guy would pull up next to you, hey, I could tell he's listening to the same radio station. There'd be like a little bond between you, like, hey, man, how's it going? Or at the beach, people would be listening to the same record or same radio station, and there was like that social connection. You kind of realize that you were part of the same tribe for that moment. And today, with technology has done a lot to bring the world to you, but it's also done a lot to keep people apart.
So, we're in this quarantine,
Yeah.
and this quarantine, I think, created this sort of on edge, isolation and
Hmm.
anxiety that
Yeah.
has kind of been a powder keg for this, a lot of these racial riots that we're experiencing right now.
Hmm.
Obviously, George Floyd, what happened there, I think everybody agrees that that was that was terrible. Obviously, the policemen should be, in jail. They just amended
Yeah. I saw that.
the the murder three to murder two,
And
and
they charged
then
the other
arrested
officers too.
charged the
Yeah.
other officers. And so it's a kind of a different kind of time right now. In this quarantine, I've heard several times by like Protestant sort of communities, Christian communities,
Hmm.
that in some way, having churches online, doing the thing online is a is better, or is hey, we got to move into the 21st century, and I've heard this kind of conversation about it, and sort of downplaying the importance of attending church in person. There's a
Yeah.
lot of sort of there's a sentiment that we are the church, the people are the church, and so you don't need the building, you don't
Right.
need whatever. And there's some of that I agree with. Definitely, we are the church. That is the truth. It is the people, but matter matters.
Hmm.
Having uh, a physical proximity to other people, the dissemination of the sacraments, you know, all of that stuff, in Orthodox Church is all taken place in a physical location that
Right.
was hallowed for that purpose.
Hmm.
In an Orthodox Church, when you face the altar, you're facing east.
Hmm.
There's a reason for that, and there's a proximate. There's a proximity. There's an orientation. There's all of that stuff that you know that that I've missed so much, especially over the last couple months.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing that, especially in the Midwest, a lot of churches are now starting to have services again
Yeah.
in person. Of course, there's a limitation on the number of people that can be present,
Hmm.
but that whole like physical communal community kind of thing. I mean, you were kind of intimating that not with spirituality per se, but when you were talking about attending concerts, and
Right.
especially those concerts being more intimate spaces where you can actually interact with the people, and you actually
Hmm.
have an opportunity to potentially meet with the artist, or at
Right.
least you're close enough to the artist to where you feel like you actually met them,
Hmm.
as opposed to like being in an arena kind of
Right.
situation or watching something on YouTube.
Hmm.
I I um, I understand the need for, especially in a situation like we're in right now, to utilize technology to the fullest to do what we can do to sort of maintain a certain continuity. But I also think that to suggest that it is equivalent is a mistake.
No, I agree with you. I mean, it's interesting that I'm on our parish council here at St. Demetrius in Rocky River, and there's a huge appetite for people to get back to church and attend services.
Yeah.
We're going very slow because of state regulations and wanting to make sure people are safe. But it's, one of my concerns was people were going to get used to the idea of not going to church and watching it online, and I think that's just a poor substitute for being in person with people that you are part of the same community. And I think you're right. It's no different than kind of a live, intimate musical performance. I mean, people are social animals. They are, you want to be, even like online shopping. Oh, that's great, very convenient. But there's something about being out at a mall or shopping district, walking around, looking, the whole kind of with your friends. I mean, I don't think that'll ever, the desire will ever go away. Hopefully, it never does. I mean, in spite of all this technology, I think it's, the need for human interaction, I don't think is ever going to go away.
Yeah, it almost sort of reminds me of some kind of a sci-fi movie where,
yeah,
because of some, world-ending kind of event, everyone moves underground.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And after yeah, right. And after generations of that, everyone has lost the pigment in their skin and are unrecognizable. I am concerned that I don't know what it's going to be like for freelance musicians in particular. I don't know what it's going to be like after this whole thing has started to really once it's gone away. I don't know that it'll ever quite be the same. I think a lot of musicians, artists are using this as an opportunity to develop some online content.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that that's positive as a supplement, as an additional aspect of their musicianship. But that's never going to be, in my mind, that'll never be as important as the role that these musicians play out in the community, playing and connecting people.
Yeah. To me, I think I read a book years ago. I think it was called Future Shock or Third Wave, one of those two. And in it talked about high tech and high touch. And this was going back a long time ago. I mean, and so when the VCR was first introduced, it's like, oh, people are not going to go to the movies anymore. They're just going to stay home and watch it on their TVs. And the opposite was the case. People, the more high tech there was more a desire for high touch, and people were flocking to theaters because they wanted that social component. I'm trying to be optimistic about our current situation. I think what's going to happen is that after, there's already a strong desire to get back to some sense of normalcy, and some people might say it's kind of a reckless desire because you saw that a couple of weeks ago down in the Ozarks or Houston when they had these, hey, we're open for business, and these gigantic pool parties all packed together, and so I think people are going to want to go back to a sense of normalcy, what it was, say, 6 months ago, and want to be together with other people, and I think music is one of the things that separates us from all other kind of life forms on the planet, our ability to make music and make it together. So I think that's to me something that I think people will value it even more in the future, and especially in a live setting as opposed to being on YouTube or any other kind of digital means. I hope I'm right.
Yeah, well, I hope so too. You're talking, and I was thinking again back about the How Sweet the Sound project, and the whole idea behind that. Yeah, I mean, we streamed it live, but that's not necessarily to take precedence over the experience that people actually had when they actually attended the event. And I think
For sure.
obviously it's a different thing. You were talking about sort of online church being a poor substitute for going to church in person.
Yeah.
In my mind, I might go a step further than that. I might say that it's not a substitute. It's a filler. Sort of, there's aspects of it that, it's like, there's a lot of podcasts. There's a lot of pastors, teachers, preachers that, they broadcast their sermons, and that's been
Right.
something that's been a regular thing. And I always get a lot out of it. And,
Mm-hmm.
no lie, I've learned a whole lot that way. But it's not really the same as going to church.
I agree.
You know, and, I was thinking about these sort of overwhelming emotional response that I had, even when trying to get started, get our program started,
Yeah.
to come up and do the first selection. And I had the organ and the percussionist. I had them start,
Yeah.
to play kind of a drone, and it took me a long time to get started because I was really, I was trying to compose myself and to control the
Yeah.
intense emotion that I was experiencing. And honestly, I doubt that I would have had that intense of an emotional feeling if we were sort of doing and it was still for the first time, but we were sort of streaming live,
Yeah. Without an
you know,
audience.
without an
Yeah.
audience.
I don't think you would have had that emotional experience. It was the people behind you that didn't want to disappoint, and you were going to, you put so much heart and soul into this thing that if there wasn't for that live audience there, I don't think you would have had that same emotional reaction. It would have been more clinical without that audience there. And I think that's what the power of these being at a live church service. You come out of a church service, hopefully feeling better. Sometimes I've come out feeling worse, not because of the service, but because my, what I'm thinking, what's going on in my head for whatever craziness that I'm thinking about, and not focusing on the church at hand. But, you don't have that when you finish watching an internet service. It's like, it's like, to me, it's like just watching like an episode of, Storage Wars. There's no emotional feeling after watching a service online, at least for me.
Well, and there's also this sense of anonymity,
Right.
that
Yeah.
you have. Like, you realize that, okay, so there's like this joke that's, everybody is playing on. It's like a meme now, right? The thing about, we're doing all these online meetings and nobody has pants on,
Yeah, right.
And so
I
it's
have pants
be-
on, I want you to know.
me too.
They're jeans, but they're not.
But it's just the sense of anonymity.
Yeah.
It just does different things to people, and you were,
Yeah.
kind of to loop back to the whole social media thing, and with some of the online bullying and stuff that takes place
Yeah.
often. A lot of it takes place again because there's this
Right.
anonymity. There's this
Yeah.
these aren't real people, or okay, it's real people, but they can't see me doing what I'm doing.
Right.
And it just, I just think it takes it does, it just creates a lesser intense experience. We're not ourselves as engaged. And I understand that we have to do what we have to do, and we need to talk as much as we can positively about what it is that we're doing, because
Yeah.
if you're talking like all negative and dark about it, then why is anybody going to tune in at
Right.
all? And
Right. Oh,
I get
exactly.
that. I understand that, but I also think that it's important for us to not try to act like uh, uh, these online versions of what we've been doing are
Yeah.
anywhere equivalent to actually partaking, actually being present,
Yeah,
the
I agree.
physical proximity. All right. Well, is there anything, Lee, that you want to say that, or
Uh,
maybe something you want to, I don't know, something you want to plug or talk about that we didn't talk about?
no, I think other than direct people to howsweetthesound.net and let them kind of experience, you know, kind of get a taste of what we did,
Yeah.
and if they have any ideas to reach out to either one of us on how to, move this project forward. Like I said, you know, when I first started talking to this about you, it was like the finish line was the event on February 1st. And afterwards, and seeing the reaction of people, I realized it was, you know, this term, I didn't come up with this term, but other people use it. It's the end of the beginning.
Yeah.
It's not the end. So it's like the first step towards something greater, and I'm hoping that it'll excite people and want to do something, with us and support us, and we're open to all kinds of ideas. And if we can, and like I said earlier, if my goal is to have a full liturgy in the gospel tradition with participation by the entire congregation and having a very diverse group of people there to pray together, that would be the topper for me.
Yeah, me too. I think that um, we have more of the Vespers. I think that we can also do.
Yeah.
I think we only covered like maybe a third or maybe as much as a half of the
Yeah.
actual
Hmm.
narrative, the verbiage there.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot that can be done there. And then definitely divine liturgy would be that'd be a beautiful
Yeah.
thing.
That sounds
Thank you
great.
so much. Thank you so
Thanks,
much,
Sean.
Leaf. Yes, thank you so much for your time and energy. And I pray for you, your family, our community. I pray for our world, that we can, have peace. That we
Yeah.
can have peace.
Yeah. Get through
And
this dark time and
yeah,
look towards a brighter future for everyone.
yes. Well, God bless
Right.
you.
Thanks, John. Take care of yourself.
All
All right.
right,
Bye
you
bye.
too. Bye.
See you.